We must compel our colonizers to recognize our rights. That's the only way. It's anything but a peace plan. It's not a deal of the century. It's the heist of the century. It's the major theft of Palestinian land and Palestinian rights by the Netanyahu and Trump regimes. I think the best response is not just defense. What matters most is action. And I think BDS tactics have proven to be the most effective for everyone around the world to be engaged in to counter this treacherous plan. Now is the time to call for serious sanctions against Israel. Now is the time to make Israel pay a price for its ongoing decades of colonization. Until now, the official Palestinian representatives have never called for sanctions against Israel, have never called for a military embargo on Israel, have never done anything effective to hold Israel to account, really. So now is the time to, after dropping any and shedding all illusions about a possible peace plan, now is the time to go with intensifying popular resistance and intensifying the boycott, divestment and sanctions, or BDS movement, against Israel worldwide. Now everyone should focus again on Palestinian basic rights under international law, in particular the rights of refugees to return to their homeland, because that constitutes the absolute most important, most consequential right. Whatever Trump says, he is not the master of the universe. He does not get to decide what the Palestinians can accept and what they cannot accept. No one can bribe us with tens of billions of dollars to give away our rights. We shall continue to insist on an end to the occupation, end to the system of apartheid, and most definitely on the rights of Palestinian refugees to return to their homeland. Nothing will force us to forget the rights of our people.
Kerahkanlah tenagamu dan juga fikiran, korbankanlah hartamu sekalipun jiwa raga, berjuang membebaskan Palestin yang tercinta. Wahai para pejuang, marilah ke hadapan, kerahkanlah tenagamu dan juga fikiran, korbankanlah hartamu sekalipun jiwa raga, berjuang membebaskan Palestin yang tercinta. Wahai para pencinta keadilan, jangan gentar berjuang bersama. Kezaliman yang bermaharajanilah kita gempur hingga ke hujungnya. Ayo bersatu demi Palestin, bersama kita berjuang untuk Palestin. Tak kira walau diancam senjata, kerana Allah kita marah. cinta keadilan, jangan gentar berjuang bersama. Kezaliman yang bermaharajalela kita gempur hingga ke hujungnya. Hentikanlah penderitaan dan juga kezaliman. Kembalikanlah keamanan di bumi impian. Berdoa kepada Ilahi agar Palestin akan merdeka, kekal sentosa selamanya. Bersatu demi Palestin, bersama kita berjuang untuk Palestin. Tak kira walau diancam senjata, kerana Allah kita marah. Kerana Allah kita marah. Kerana Allah kita marah.
Once I introduce the speakers, I will inshallah reverse the camera for you to watch the webinar on my laptop. Something from me.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Perhaps on behalf of Brother Muslim Imran, I would like to start the forum for tonight, and probably I will introduce Tan Sri, all our speakers. The first and foremost would be Tan Sri Said Hamid Alba. Assalamualaikum Tan Sri.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Okay, sorry for that technical error. Probably Brother Muslim can join us later on. And so this is Tan Sri Syed Hamid Alba, also Foreign Minister of Malaysia, former Foreign Minister of Malaysia. The next speaker would be Dr. Sharif Abu Samalah. Assalamualaikum, brother.
Walaikum Assalam wa rahmatullah.
So Dr. Sharif is from Yayasan Al-Quds, Malaysia. Naam?
Yes, that's right.
Yes, okay. So our third speaker would be my very own father, Dr. Hafiz Muhammad Noor.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
And probably our last speaker is Tuan Haji Azmi from MAPIM.
Yes. Assalamualaikum warahmatullah.
Okay, so basically tonight's program would be on the recent event, the recent progress on Palestine, the American-Israel sedition, West Bank annexation, the role of the international community and Islamic countries. So probably on behalf of Muslim Imran, I would like to invite Tan Sri to deliver his speech.
Assalamualaikum. Thank you very much for asking me to start off. And I think I will start off by saying that on Malaysia's position first. Malaysia's in terms of its foreign policy and in terms of its assertiveness in the Palestinian struggle, we have been very principled, we have been consistent talking about the problems of in the context of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. And I think I think when we talk about the international community and Islamic countries, I think what is the international community? Is it we are talking about the United Nations, or we are talking about the various countries who are members of the United Nations? Whatever it is, I think the most important thing, there must be a serious effort. I think we have always, in the case of Malaysia, we have stated that land grab is not acceptable, building new settlements are not acceptable, and the UN resolutions must be implemented. So I think the problem started with from 1917 and then 1948 and then 1967. There are so many, I think we talk about stall, Israeli-Palestinian peace process. To me, I never see it starting because Israel is not interested. You are fighting against a Zionist machine that control, I think, most of the major powers and global government. From the start has been like that. Until now, it is still so. And I think the worst that has happened is that the so-called grand agenda of Trump to create a peace process that is the best of the century. I think here, first we must tackle, like Malaysia did before, we were the first one to ask South Africa to leave the Commonwealth because of apartheid. This is apartheid. There is crime against humanity. There is gross violations of human rights of the Palestinians. So I think here, what our problem really is, the Israelis know there can be a lot of peace accord, there can be a lot of diplomatic initiatives, but there is no move to find a settlement. So the narrative is decided by the Israeli government, especially under Netanyahu. You see, they are very clear of what they want to do. You can pretend to be negotiating. You make, like you see the Camp David, you see the Oslo Accord, you see the Clinton parameters, the Taba Summit, the Arab Peace Initiative, and then the Mitchell talk, and then you have the Kerry talks. All these are not moving the peace process at all. So if we expect the peace process to move, I would say that there must be some mechanism to force the Israeli to comply with international law. The US itself, when it supplies arms or give aid to a country like Israel, there is in an area of conflict, they have violated human rights. The US has not only broken their own national domestic laws, but they have also breached the international law. So I think Israel, when the first veto that was used by the US in order to prevent anything negative about Israel was in 1976. And we see from then on, Israel is the only country in the world that can ignore resolutions of the UN, that can ignore international law. So what is the incentive, motivation for them to move? So I think here, I like to congratulate the civil rights movement, the Palestinian movement, for now pushing this issue to be more recognized in the international sphere. People are realizing what the Israelis are doing. And if you talk about it, this is the only, we must protect Israel because it's the only democratic country in the Middle East. I think this is nonsense. There is no, Israel is not a democratic country. Its laws are all discriminatory. It doesn't allow for free movement. It doesn't allow freedom of speech. So I think here, we must make the issue very clear. So I would agree that, but there must be, I think there should be consensus among the international community to move together. I think in the case of South Africa, they move together. In this particular case, they must be moving together in order to ensure that Israelis follow or adhere to international law. What they are doing now, the latest scheme, is not acceptable. And the voice that it is not acceptable must be loud and clear. And I would agree that sanction, military embargo should be undertaken. Because Israel always consider that the solution to the Palestinian-Israeli issue is by them wanting their security or their rights to defend. What rights to defend? They have been doing all the harm. They have created, they have implemented, I call it a state terrorism against innocent Palestinians. The number of civilians that got hurt as a result of their actions, and they ignore whatever we say or the voices, unless, I think here, what is important is, let us see which international community do we want to make the move. We have made the move. There must be more countries making the move. There must be not only at the United Nations, and we must take action, not rhetoric or simply saying, yes, we support the Palestinian issue. We support the Palestinian to be given their rights, but it must be something that show we are willing to take action. This is a time for action. I think it's rhetorics. We have done so much. There's so many political, we try to solve by political will. There's so much diplomatic activity. But what is next? What type of action can we take? I think even among ourselves, if we talk this, to me, I don't consider this as a Muslim issue. I consider it an issue of humanitarian and issue of justice, denial of rights of people, and ignoring the whole view of the international community and ignoring international law. In the case of US, it ignores two laws. Its own domestic law that doesn't allow it to export military equipment or anything in a conflict area where there is an armed conflict. In the international law, we must see the implementation, especially, I think, but at present, I'm sorry to say, I'm still very negative. I'm still negative. The two-state solution, everything that works was a delay tactic on the part of Israel not to implement anything. You're fighting, my brothers from Palestine, you're not fighting Israel as a state. You are fighting, your struggle is against the Zionist movement worldwide. It's a global movement worldwide. And they are controlling major powers. You know, whether you, I mean, some of us like to be apologetic, you don't want to say it. But I think we need to say, as far as the OIC is concerned, Islamic countries, there's very few Islamic countries. There are many Muslim countries, but Islamic countries are few. They may say something, but they will not do very much. But that's why you need to find your friends in the Islamic country that want to move forward the process. I think you have done everything that is possible. There is so now the next step. Let us take a step that will bring result. That the Israeli feel yes, they need to comply. They need to hear. I think the right of return is not. They say no. The right of return. Now with Trump there, they are becoming more certain about their rights. US has decided to make their embassy, to open their embassy in Jerusalem. And now I think the whole of the occupied territories is going to be part of Israel. I was talking to one of the Western countries' leaders. I said, why can't some of the most powerful and close Israeli friends in the West initiate, because US is difficult, or Britain for that matter, is difficult for them to become an honest peace broker. Because if you are partial, then you cannot. But the public, this is where you are succeeding now. You are gaining more public support. You are getting more people's support of the various countries that I have mentioned. So I hope that we can take, I think, I do not know what is going to be the effect of the new geopolitical situation in the Middle East. With, as you talk about Muslim countries just now, the Islamic countries, what are they going to do? Because more countries in the Middle East is recognizing them. There is more relationship, even among the OIC members. There are OIC members that now establish very good relation. My friend in Indonesia now will get the help of our friend, will get the help of the Israel. So I think you need to do something more to on a constant basis. So if you want to do sanction, you must get a cooperation. It must be there must be a political will. At present, there is no political will. There is, economic sanction requires political will. You cannot drive, if there is no political will on the part of the international community to implement, and there is no political will to enforce, then Islamic and international community will once again fail the rights and I think the aspirations of the Palestinian people. So that's why at this stage, I think I would like to stop there, because I think there is so much that needs to be done. And if we ignore this and we make it a Muslim struggle alone, it's not going to succeed. I think it's not struggle. All your support from the international community, because it's a question of justice and humanity. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity, for inviting me. Thank you, Muslim.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much, Tansri. We are very honored to have had your presentation. It's a good start for our online webinar. This webinar is the first phase of a series of webinars. We are having a number of online virtual activities in response to the Israeli-American deal of the century and annexation of the West Bank plan. Earlier last week, we had an emergency meeting in which about 7 NGOs attended, and the discussion revolved around how to go about the current Israeli government's plan to annex the West Bank. And the start was by issuing press statements. Almost all the NGOs involved issued their press statements, and a joint letter was sent to His Excellency the Prime Minister of Malaysia by the leaders of these NGOs, requesting that Malaysia take the lead internationally in pressuring the United States to stop this Israeli plan. As for this webinar, we are very honored to have a number of distinguished speakers. I went offline just now because of the connection in the start of the forum, but I believe my friend started moderating this session. I would like to give a very brief introduction to the speakers that we are having tonight. Our first speaker, who has just concluded his introductory speech, was Tansri Said Hamid Al-Bar. Tansri Said Hamid Al-Bar is a very distinguished Malaysian and international figure. He has served as a member of parliament in over 2 decades in the Malaysian parliament, and he served as the Minister of Home Affairs, Defense, as well as Foreign Minister of Malaysia. And he was the envoy of the OIC to the issue of the Rohingyas in Myanmar. And he continues to be an active, I would put it this way, an active activist for human rights and freedoms, especially freedom of the persecuted people of Palestine and other persecuted people elsewhere. So thank you so much, Tan Sri, for your speech. Please stay tuned with us. We will be very glad to have some questions answered by you in the upcoming session. I would like to, thank you. I would like to now move the floor to our next speaker. We have with us tonight 4 speakers. The first was Tan Sri Said Hamid Al-Bar, and we will be listening also to activists from different Malaysian NGOs who have issued statements condemning the Israeli American annexation plan, and who have had a very important role in highlighting the Palestinian struggle in general. We are talking about a very serious Israeli plan that was endorsed by the Israeli unity government. The plan is to annex the West Bank gradually, taking firstly the Gulf, taking firstly the Jordan Valley and Jerusalem, of course, and moving on to annex the Israeli settlements in the West Bank, which cater to over 700,000 illegal Israeli settlers. In order to respond to this, we had an important emergency meeting about a week ago that was attended by representatives from Islamic Renaissance Front, MAPIM, MyCare, Pcom, Quds Foundation, Sejagat, as well as BDS Malaysia and International Movement for a Just World, and the Asia West East Center. The idea was to have some sort of virtual response to the ongoing Israeli atrocities and attacks on the Palestinians, and to commemorate the Day of Al-Quds, which is an internationally recognized commemoration that is celebrated by many across the Muslim world in particular. So I move to the next speaker. He is one of the important activists who has written extensively on the Palestinian issue, Professor Hafizi Muhammad Noor. Associate Professor Hafizi Muhammad Noor is an academic who is also an activist who visited Palestine on several occasions. He has been to Gaza twice. He has written a number of books, mainly about the Palestinian-Israeli conflict and the Palestinian struggle. And he leads MyCare Malaysia, one of the leading humanitarian NGOs here in Malaysia. We're very honored to have you, Prof. Hafizi. Ahlan wa sahlan.
Jazakallah khairan.
Hayakumullah.
Hayakumullah.
We'll be very happy to have a presentation from your good self in about 10 minutes. And maybe you could shed some light on the current development and how you perceive it as the leader of one of the Malaysian humanitarian organizations, and what should be done.
Jazakumullah khairan to Brother Imran. And Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh to everyone, fellow speakers, Tan Sri, Honorable Tan Sri, and then Dr. Sharif Abu Shamala, and Cikgu Azmi, very respected senior in our struggle for the Palestinian people. Alhamdulillah, it was a very good start by the speech given by Tan Sri, and within the time frame of about 10 minutes, I think I would like to discuss on the issue of annexation. We need to know what is the status of the West Bank for the past 51 years. As we realize that the West Bank has been recognized as an occupied, is under occupation, and that has been decided by the United Nations which has passed the resolution 242, which states that Israel must withdraw totally from the West Bank and from East Jerusalem, and also from the Gaza Strip back then, when they occupied them in the 1967 war, or popularly known as the Six-Day War. So make no mistake, the status of West Bank and also East Jerusalem for now is under occupation. So what difference does it make? When Israel announced that it will annex the territory? We need to understand the term annexation, or in Bahasa, we don't have this term actually. I think it was recently coined. It's called mengilhaqkan. And the first time I heard about this, and I think the reason is quite straightforward, because annexation is something that being practiced by powerful governments of the past. I think the last time annexation was implemented, it was done by Adolf Hitler just before the start of the Second World War. Hitler annexed Austria, Hungary, and also parts of Czechoslovakia before actually invading Poland, and that actually started the Second World War. So what is annexation actually? It is simply someone claim without any regard to anyone else, claiming that a particular territory is his. Literally, it means to add on to your territory. I mean, you have a country, you have an area, and then you simply claim that I'm going to add another area and to be part of the territory. That is what happening. And this was possible back then because there was no laws that actually regulate relationship between nations. And we see after the Second World War, when regulations, conventions were in place, like the Fourth Geneva Convention, and then we have the Declaration of Human Rights in 1948, and then we have all the United Nations itself, which has passed so many resolutions. And so annexation was no longer acceptable back then. So when Israel launched the attack in 1967, they went over, they crossed the Green Line, which was established in 1949. That was actually endorsed by the United Nations through Resolution 181 in 1947, and also with the endorsement of the Rhodes Armistice in 1949. So that was the Green Line. So which Israel has to observe, and they have actually violated that. They crossed over and they took over the whole of the West Bank. So in 1967, there was not a single inch of free Palestinian land. And Israel immediately, after taking over Jerusalem, announced that it is the capital of Israel, de facto. And then in 1980, they have passed a law which legally recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Anyway, this is unilaterally done, and we are not obliged to actually accept such a declaration. So that was the situation. Now we have come to a stage whereby, under the present Trump administration, Israel has become more blatant in their move, and we have seen that when Trump actually recognizes Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, and then move on to shift the embassy from Tel Aviv to Baitul Maqdis or to Jerusalem, and then put up the deal of the century, which actually aim to erase Palestine from the map of the world, and also to assign the 70 years of struggle, the Palestinian struggle, to the bin of history. So that is the situation. Now, Netanyahu, after he has failed in 3 consecutive elections, then he teamed up with his opponent, Barry Gantz, and then they come up with this idea of taking over the West Bank and claim it to be part of the Israeli territory. This is a very serious violation of the rights of the Palestinian, because the West Bank has been recognized as an occupied territory, regardless of what the Israeli what the Israelis claim on the West Bank. And America actually has assigned the West Bank as a disputed territory, as if both the Palestinian and the Israeli has equal rights on them. But this is the legal point. The legal point of view, the West Bank is an occupied territory, and Israel has to play the role as an occupier, meaning to say that it has fulfilled the basic rights, the rights to medication, the rights to education, as stipulated by the Geneva Fourth Convention. That is the responsibility of an occupier to its occupied land, and the people that is under occupation has all the rights to fight for liberation and to use all means of resistance to free itself from occupation. That is the current status now. Now, when Israel announced that it will annex, it will add West Bank as part of its territory, this means that the Palestinians' struggle will not be recognized, or will not be recognized by Israel. This is a situation that I think the world must realize. Must realize, and it is a very serious matter. And just think about it. Even in the wake of the COVID-19, Israel went ahead with such a heinous plan to erase the right of the Palestinian people altogether. And this is actually a move to fulfill the deal of the century to its completion. That is the situation now. And what we need to do is we need to push forward and urge the international community and to come together with one voice, with a strong advocacy. And we need to push the government of Malaysia, at least, to bring this up in international forum, in ASEAN, in OIC, of course, and also in the United Nations. And we hope, with a very strong and united front, supported by the civil society, supported by the communities the world over, and we are seeing a very strong support for the Palestinian cause, especially through BDS. A lot of civil societies, including in Europe, they have actually endorses BDS, and this forced the EU to voice out the aspiration of the people. As we can see, even EU is objecting to the plan of annexation of the West Bank, and this is a very good start because EU now has a stand that is going to stand by the Palestinian struggle. Hopefully, with a very if we are together, and speak with one voice, we can force Israel to comply to the rights of the Palestinian people, and also to listen to the international community. We have done it before. For the past 10 years, we are seeing more support coming from the international community. 140 over nations, members of the United Nations, has actually supported the idea of sovereign Palestinian state. So I think that is the view that we must express strongly in support of the Palestinian people. I think for now, I think I think I stop now. Maybe we can discuss further when there are questions and answers. Jazakallah khairan kaseeran.
That is very good for a start. We've had a very good insight on the development and what should be done by Malaysia and the international community. We will come back to you, Prof. Hafizi, inshallah, in minutes. But let us welcome to our conversation Cikgu Azmi, Haji Muhammad Azmi Abdul Hamid. He is a well-known Malaysian activist who has played major roles in mobilizing the public here in Malaysia and across ASEAN for the issue of Palestine and many other humanitarian issues. Cikgu Azmi, ahlan wa sahlan. Thank you very much for being with us on this show. You are the chairman of MAPIM, or the president of MAPIM, as well as the secretary general of a number of organizations. One of them is the International Assembly for World Masajid in Defense of Al-Aqsa. I believe you have a lot to share with us here tonight. Thank you for joining us. And we will probably hear from you about what can be done here in Malaysia and across the region in defense of what remains in the issue of Palestine. You have drafted a number of statements as well recently, including the letter to His Excellency the Prime Minister. So we are very eager to hear from you. Cikgu Azmi, tafaddal.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you so much for the invitation. This is a very significant discussion that we're having. Basically, what Tan Sri was speaking just a few minutes ago was the keyword, the action. This is the important thing. The narration or the narratives of this is quite clear. Whatever it is, whether it's about annexation plan or it's about the whole occupation, the whole period of occupation, I think the understanding is very clear. We are facing a kind of a coalition of superpowers, whether directly or indirectly with Israel, and therefore they are moving on to continue this occupation, and more doing that is to have this greater agenda of expanding or widening the scope of the occupation in terms of the space. I would agree very much that like Tan Sri and Prof. Hafizi was saying, we have to identify what would be the key actions that we need to do, the ones that give these the impact that we want. So when the question you're asking me about what can we do in the context of Malaysia. Now, looking at what Tan Sri has been saying, that we have been consistent, we've been very principled, as a stand of a nation coming out from the government. But again, the government also needs a very strong support from the grassroots. So I think there is more need to be done at building up from the bottom to up, where we have all the civil societies in Malaysia. We have all the activists that are around, whether you have political activists or you have NGO activists. There's a need for us to approach and refresh and prepare grounds for what they can do at their own level and their own spaces, whether it's a small career or whether it's at the campuses of the university, or you talk about associations from right down from civil servants association. I mean, all these have to be reached out. I mean, they are having a very clear understanding of the problem of Israel. They may not be able to grasp the whole integrity of what's happening, at the moment, and then this annexation plan is coming up and all that. But I think when you say Palestine, everybody will have that kind of awareness. Now we have to tap that. We have to take the advantage of this, and then we have to widen their understanding, and then we have to have some practical things that they can do at their level. And of course, this BDS movement is a very good tool. So we have to define to them what they can do at the local level to take part in this PDS. But then again, you have institutions at the level of the society. You have the masjid, you have the surah, and then you have all kinds of activities relating to women folk, relating to the young people, relating to the pensioners. You know, we have to be creative to approach them, how to get them on board in many activities that we can give options to them. And we have been doing that. I mean, a lot of our organizations has been going around giving talks at the masjid, giving talks in the surah, and also to government premises. I think we have to keep that alive. But then again, as we are saying now, what would be the most high impact kind of activities that we can do at this juncture? I was writing a few things, and after drafting this letter to the Prime Minister and getting him to, you know, at least acknowledge that it's important right now, at least for the annexation plan, to Malaysia to rise again, and you know, voice out under the pretext that we are a country, member country of the OIC, and we are a member country of the United Nations. I think we have the credibility to sound to them that, you know, they have to do something. But then again, I think I've written, also drafted a few more letters to come out, and I'll circulate around, at least to the muftis. We've written to about 10 muftis, and 2 have already responded, the Mufti of Penang and also the Mufti of Sabah, endorsing what we're doing. And then we can put up their names, that these are the muftis have sounded that we have to be very firm on this issue of Palestine. Now, let me just expand a little bit, other than the Malaysian part. I mean, aside from the grassroots level, of course, the media, the local media is also very important. We have to educate them, we have to inform them, we have to get them on board in all the programs they have to, so that they can highlight in the media. So the media part is so important at the local level. And also at the parliamentarian level, there's a lot of initiative. We have to reach out to all the parliamentarians, irrespective of whatever political stand they have. But I think we have shown for the last decades that when it comes to Palestinian, all parliamentarians from every political parties, we are together in this. So I think we have to proceed further on that, and still, you know, approach them and ask them to voice it out as a parliamentarian. They have to play their role in their constituency and also in the debates in the parliament. But then again, whatever we do in Malaysia, there is definitely an important effort for us to link what's happening, whether it's the region or the international. There is importance of linking up all our activities with other activities going around many parts of the world. There are so many things that we can share. There are tremendous ideas that's coming up from many parts of the world, whether it's the European, whether it's the Latin Americans, or whether the African countries. I saw this Fly the Flag campaign. You know, it's amazing that people from all walks of life, whether they are farmers, whether they're workers, whether they are the young generation, they're all out there. They are trying to express their solidarity with Palestine, and we have to link that together. I mean, the masses in Malaysia have to also rise up and say that, you know, we are together with them, and we see that what they are doing have to also be part of what we are doing. So it's a kind of preparing a good ground of international movement. So my last word on this, I think that is a very important educational part of our activities, where a lot more. I was listening to Noam Chomsky saying that, you know, we really have to work with the young people, the young generation out there. They are now moving more. They have become more alert. They have become more. You know, they can express more. I think there's a lot of work that we can do with all the organization that relates to the young people. I think it's high time now, as far as mobilization is concerned, at the grassroots level, the young people is the what we call the key players. So I think that is my view on how we can move the people at the grassroots, and also how to link what we are doing in Malaysia with also the international movements. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Chigo Azmi. And I believe what you have mentioned about engaging the youth, mobilizing people on the grassroots level is very, very important and very essential. And since we are living now through the new normal, as they call after the prevalence of the COVID pandemic, social media and the online world has become more important, and we have to mobilize people through social media and through other virtual platforms. Yes, it's difficult to transform things physically on the ground in Palestine virtually, but we can exert as much pressure on occupation as possible. And this year's Quds Day celebrations are going virtual, and I see so many webinars, seminars, programs, and hashtags around. So thank you so much for your insights. We will come back to you, inshallah, Hajj Azmi, in minutes. And my dear brothers and sisters who are tuning to our talk tonight, whether on My Care Facebook page or Yayasan Quds Facebook page or any other social media outlet, let me remind you of another webinar that we will be having as a part of the emergency discussions that we have had last week. There will be another webinar held tomorrow, inshallah, online as well, involving senior distinguished speakers. The title is the One State Solution, Two State Solution, No State, reflections on the recent developments in the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. And the speakers will include Prof. Peter Slezak from Australia, Professor Ruslan Muhammad Noor from University of Malaya, as well as Professor Nazari Ismail, the head of BDS. And it will be moderated by Dr. Farouk Musa of IRF. The show tomorrow is also equally important, so we will be very happy if you also tune in and listen to what they have to say about the current developments in Palestine. Now, let me bring our fourth speaker for tonight, Dr. Sharif Abu Shammala. He is a fellow Palestinian from the Gaza Strip. Dr. Sharif is the CEO of Quds Foundation Malaysia, and he has written extensively on the issue of Palestine and Jerusalem in particular. He has his PhD on Islamic architecture history from the University of Malaya, and I believe he has written about the Islamic architecture of the city of Jerusalem and Al-Aqsa Mosque in his PhD. So, Dr. Sharif, ahlan wa sahlan. Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
And you also have about 10 minutes to highlight the situation in Jerusalem and what this annexation plan means for the people of Jerusalem and for Al-Aqsa Mosque and for the people of Palestine.
Inshallah. Jazakallah khair akhi. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيد الخلق أجمعين محمد بن عبد الله الصادق الأمين. Dear brothers and sisters and everyone here, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Actually, I would like to highlight 2 points in this short time, inshallah ta'ala. The first, inshallah, the situation now in Al-Quds under the pandemic of coronavirus. The second one, as Brother Muslim introduced, that I will talk about the situation, the Al-Quds under the deal of the century, inshallah ta'ala. In fact, Baytul Maqdis and Al-Quds city is living under 2 pandemics. The first is the occupation, which is a continuous since 1948 until now. And the second is the coronavirus, which is which Al-Quds under the suffering of coronavirus like most of parts of this world. But the difference between Al-Quds and other parts of the world, that Al-Quds under the Israeli occupation, which is used the coronavirus to implement and to impose a new fact and the new reality on the ground against the will of the Palestinian people in Bayt al-Maqdis. One more thing in the pandemic of the Israeli occupation, how they deal with the people of Al-Quds. They announced day and night, always they announce that Al-Quds is united under the Israeli and it is the capital of Israel. But when it comes to the health matters, they neglect all the cases of Bayt al-Maqdis. Even when they count the cases, they don't count the cases in Bayt al-Maqdis. And bifadlillah azza wa jal, and with the supporting of our ummah, the people in Bayt al-Maqdis now try their best to tackle this issue themselves, and they form the committee and the public committee from the local people and NGOs and activists to face and to fight the coronavirus in the city. One more thing, the coronavirus has badly affected the economy of the city, because the city depends on the tourism, because it is a religious tourism distance, and now these days is the peak of the tourism season for the Christians and others. So the city badly affected because the shops has closed, and all aspects of economy activities locked down, and no one can practice the activities of the economy in the city without much support from all parties, especially the formal parties. But the people try their best. The second thing, also in the economy matter, because the city 40% of the economy of the city depends on the tourism. The other thing is the education. The education, it is part of the economy of the city, because the people of the city try to be dependent on the education process, and they try their best to have their own school, and they have their private and local schools. So many teachers now without jobs, and it adds more difficulties for the people in Bayt al-Maqdis. On the ground, the Israeli authorities now put a lot of roadblocks to prevent people and to control the situation on the ground, to prevent any flow of the people in any action against Masjid al-Aqsa. Then they put and they install every day a new systems of CCTV to control every single inch in the city and to control everybody in the holy city of Bayt al-Maqdis. And this put fear that how they will deal with the people after the lockdown caused by coronavirus. This is in general the situation in Bayt al-Maqdis during this time of coronavirus. In another aspect, we speak about the deal of century and the annexation of the West Bank. Al-Quds, under deal of the century, is part of the Israeli agenda. It is clear, not American plan. It is 100% an Israeli plan to dominate every single part of the city, to control the land of the city. They want more land, less people, and this is clear and very clear in the details of the so-called peace plan of Trump, deal of the century. And if we read the deal of the century, we find they propose to unite Al-Quds, as they claim, to be the capital of Israel. Then they want to give the Palestinian people a part of a neighborhood to establish there new capital to be called Al-Quds, not Jerusalem. They say the exact Bayt al-Maqdis now, it would be Jerusalem and as the capital of Israel, and the next part, and they will establish a new city called Al-Quds, and this will be the capital for the promised Palestinian state. And this is very silly plan and proposal, because they consider Bayt al-Maqdis with its heritage, with its as part of the Muslim Aqidah, as part of the character of the Palestinian struggle and the Palestinian heritage and the Palestinian mind. They want to convert it to just a piece of land. You just want a piece of land? Okay, we will give you another Quds. We will establish a capital for you to be called Al-Quds, even in Shafat camp or Abu Dis village or any place near Bayt al-Maqdis. And this is very dangerous. Even it is silly, but it is dangerous because the one who want to implement is very brutal, and he wants to implement this against the will of the Palestinian people, against the will of the law, international law, all human behavior. The second thing in the deal of century depends on the people of Al-Quds. And the deal of century provides 3 choices for the people of Al-Quds. First, to be citizens of so-called Israel. Second, to be citizens of the promised state of Palestine. The third, to remain residents on the city. But if we look carefully in these 3 choices, we find it will destroy the Palestinian existence in the city, because if they revoke their Palestinian citizenship to be Israeli citizenship or citizens, this will lead to destroy the Palestinian existence in the city. And the other thing, if they want to be Palestinian, they should and they must leave Bayt al-Maqdis and go to the promised Palestine, which is just a few islands in Palestine, especially in West Bank and Gaza. Just 15% of the actual area of Palestine. Then they ask them to leave Bayt al-Maqdis, and it would be very good for Israel. The third, to remain as permanent residents, and the Israeli Home Minister can anytime revoke their ID for any resistance against the occupation, even it is peacefully resistance. They will kick them out from the city. The third and most important, the location and the situation on Masjid al-Aqsa al-Mubarak. Now the plan consider Masjid al-Aqsa al-Mubarak is Temple Mount, and they just want to consider Bayt al-Maqdis or Masjid al-Aqsa al-Mubarak is the Qibli Mosque only. And they said, okay, we will dominate the area, the old city, Eastern Jerusalem, and we will dominate also and control over Masjid al-Aqsa al-Mubarak, but we will give an advance for the Palestinian and others to freedom to enter Masjid al-Aqsa al-Mubarak, but under the Israeli control. So anyone support Palestine, Israel can prevent. Anyone resist Israel from the Palestinian, he will be prevented from entering Masjid al-Aqsa. And this is something very, very bad for the dignity of Ummah to stall their most important masjid, the third mosque of the Al-Aqsa, which is the part of their Aqidah. And this is in general how the deal of the century deal with the Palestinian in Bayt al-Maqdis and the Al-Quds itself.
Thank you very much.
It is in general more land, less Palestinian. They want more land with less.
Inshallah, we will come back to you. This is an important conclusion. More land for Israel and less Palestinians in Palestine. Thank you very much, Dr. Sharif. I think he has brought our attention to a very important and critical issue, which is the deal of the century. Now, the deal of the century is the talk of the times in the Middle East and probably across the Muslim world. One of the biggest problems of the deal of the century is that it does not recognize the Palestinians as a group of people. It does not acknowledge the dignity of the Palestinian people. When the deal of the century was announced in the United States by President Trump and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, there were no Palestinian partners, and the Palestinians were not consulted on their future. And it was very unfortunate that the author of this plan, Jared Kushner, looks down at the Palestinians. In many of his interviews, he was very, I would say, arrogant in saying that the Palestinians have a history of screwing up every offer that they get. This is a group of people that has lived in Palestine for thousands of years. It was forcibly thrown out of its homeland, and its homeland was occupied by a foreign occupation. Then comes a superpower, which is to a large extent influenced and controlled by Zionist lobbies. This power comes to tell the Palestinians that they have a history of screwing up every offer and every deal that they have been offered. But that is not going to change the reality on the ground. The Palestinians are very determined to resist occupation. Thank you very much, Dr. Sharif, for your insight. We will have some of the inputs of our friends watching this seminar on Facebook pages. We are broadcasting live on my care page and the Yasan al-Quds page. And one of the comments, I think it pertains to me, the moderator, is that the comment was from Brother Poche Hisham. He misses Khalid Jimat as the moderator. We will have Brother Khalid Jimat, inshallah, who is one of the committee members who have made this webinar a reality. We will have him moderate one of the sessions, inshallah, very soon. We have an important question from Dr. Fawzia Hassan. Dr. Fawzia is the chairperson of Rose to Rose and a senior activist. She is asking, is it possible to organize an alternative or addition to United Nations, OIC, since they do not seem to produce any results regarding Palestine? I will go to Tansri Said Hamid with this question. Tansri, you have represented Malaysia in so many international platforms, and I recall that you have, in many conversations we had, you've mentioned that you promoted the Palestinian right, you were advocating the Palestinian right on international platforms. This is a question from a very important and influential activist, Dr. Fawzia Hassan. This is a question of so many actually in the Muslim world. Is there a way out other than these international platforms, since they seem to be handicapped?
Okay, thank you very much to Dr. Fawzia for a very interesting, I think, poser. That is there an alternative or addition to UNOIC? I think because the world order, I do not know, the world order is such that it is institutionalized, and if you want to have a success, you have to go through the institution. But now, there's another, the alternative as I see it, since all these bodies are paralyzed, like United Nations, United Nations is paralyzed. At present, United Nations is being bullied by the superpower. So it's very difficult for the United Nations to move. OIC, I don't think we have got consensus on how we should act, even though they support the Palestinian position. But my view is, if you are looking for alternative or addition to UN and OIC, your best bet is the civil society at the grassroots level. At the grassroots level, because I think today I find that the Palestinian issue, or whether it is annexation, annexation, just now our Dr. Professor was asking whether what is the annexation. Annexation is a forced acquisition, which is not recognized by international law. So I think now your voices are being heard now through this grassroots, through civil society. And I think another one that is very important, they have different positions from their government, are the parliamentary association. Like, you have parliamentary caucus on Palestine, say, in Malaysia. You must have that. Like we have, on every time there is a new struggle, we say that, if it is not discussed in parliament, the matter cannot be championed as effectively. What you want is to see an effective channel or an effective forum or mechanism for us to have our case heard and action can be taken on it. You have succeeded so far to make the issue important, relevant to the international community to consider. And I think Israeli is moving because of what you are doing at present, and you're getting more and more support. Israeli is making more and more countermeasures in order to combat whatever whatever messages that you are sending that is having effect. So I think still you need to look for alternative, and I agree that alternative is the best. Look at civil society, improve our advocacy, and improve our strategy and tactic in order to have them influencing the institutions, so it will be more meaningful. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Tansri. I think this is a very important suggestion that we have to engage the civil society, because if we are to have an impact in this current international system, then we have to engage everyone, and we have to make use of each and every power or agency that can play a role. Some are very classical realists who look at the international system and say that there are only states that are running the show, and civil society groups, international organizations, individuals have no impact whatsoever. But developments in Palestine and elsewhere have proven these analysts wrong. The Intifada was started by Palestinian individuals and Palestinian factions and Palestinian public, and it has impacted the situation in Palestine tremendously in the first Intifada, in the second Intifada. So the international civil society groups have also an important role to play. We are talking now about the impact of the BDS movement internationally on the Israeli government. It has a huge impact. Israel has assigned a specific ministry to handle the pressure coming from the BDS. They are allocating a special budget for that, and they are publishing annual reports on the effects of BDS on the Israeli economy and Israeli situation. And very recently, when the current Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu convened his first cabinet meeting, one of the important things that he mentioned in this meeting was that Israel is going to face a strategic threat in the days to come from the International Criminal Court. So he recognized that this international institution is going to actually be a strategic threat to Israel because, of course, of Israel's criminal record. If the Palestinians pursue the International Criminal Court, there will be huge impact on the Israeli power. It will be limited to a huge extent. Now, let me highlight that one of the friends contacted us and asked where are the female panelists in our show. So we have clarified that this whole show was prepared in the last minute in order to respond to the Israeli annexation plan, and in order to highlight the current raising discourse in protest to this Israeli plan, and to commemorate the Quds Day as well. We will have, inshallah, female speakers in the upcoming webinars. This is the first of a series of webinars. And I remind, we will have another webinar running tomorrow, inshallah. Now, let me bring the Prof. Hafizi back to our discussion. Prof. Hafizi, Tansri has just answered Dr. Fawzia about the importance of the civil society groups. The United Nations, the OIC have been able to change things on the ground, but maybe civil society groups can play an important role. You have been active in the humanitarian organizations. You have written on the humanitarian work, visited Palestine several times. From your experience here in Malaysia, do you think that civil society groups can actually impact the situation in Palestine, and can they also impact positions of governments worldwide, including here in Malaysia?
I think I would like to comment on the role of the United Nations. As we can see, United Nations now has a little more empowered compared to previous years, at least in the past decade, whereby we are seeing member states giving more support for the Palestinian cause. For instance, back in 2012, 140 member states have actually endorsed and will support the existence of a sovereign Palestinian state. So that is a very huge leap forward if we consider the track record of the United Nations for the past many years, for the past many decades. And also, we have won several landmark victories. In the case of Malaysia, for instance, when we were member of the United Nations Security Council, and Malaysia has initiated has mooted one resolution whereby all settlements in the West Bank is being labeled as illegal, and that was a landmark victory for the United Nations. So I think United Nations is still relevant since member states are now giving more support for the Palestinian cause. And secondly, of course, when we talk about OIC, for instance, OIC may have lost its fervor, although it was formed as a result of the Palestinian cause in 1969, but we were so divided on the stance on Israel as a result of normalization, and I think OIC need to be rejuvenated, which is quite challenging. It's easier said than done, because every nation have their own policy and also stand on the Palestinian issue now. For instance, if we look at, we have to be honest, if we look at Saudi Arabia, if we look at the Gulf states, if we look at Egypt, it will be very difficult to bring together our views in support of the Palestinian cause. And coming back to the role of the civil societies, of course, we have scored several successes, landmark victory. For instance, in 2010, through the Lifeline for Gaza, they have launched the flotilla Mavi Marmara, whereby more than 600 volunteers from all over the world, half of them are from Europe. This is an indication that civil society now is more relevant than ever. And then this is followed by the Break the Siege, several initiatives made by the Freedom Flotilla Coalition, and then we have the Women's Boat to Gaza, which was actually run by individuals and also by civil societies from Europe, mainly from Europe, and we also participated in that event. In fact, Dr. Fawzia Hassan was one of those that was detained by Israel when they tried to reach the shores of Gaza. So this is giving a very huge impact on the Palestinian struggle, and I think in the years to come, civil society will make a very a very big, huge impact on the Palestinian struggle. And we look at BDS. BDS was actually initiated by about 150 Palestinian civil societies. They come together and they have come up with this initiative, BDS, and now it's getting support from all over the world. We have BDS chapters in the US, in the UK, in Thailand, in South Korea, and we also have our own BDS chapter that was inaugurated in 2017, and we have scored a few major success, including boycott of Puma, and that is picking up in the international arena. So I think we can. This is the best bet for now. We can rely on civil society and continue to come together and shoulder to shoulder in order to come up with an effective impact that will leave a mark on the struggle for Palestinian liberation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Hafidi. I believe Malaysian civil society groups are amongst the most active and vigorous in the Muslim world. We have seen the impact of their work over the past. One of the important influences that they have had was the formation of the Palestine caucus in the Malaysian parliament, which is headed now by a former civil society activist, YB Said Ibrahim. So it's important that the Malaysian experience in civil society activism is passed over to neighboring ASEAN member countries as well, and to the rest of the OIC member states. Let me move to Chigo Azmi, and I wish to ask about the deal of the century to you as a Malaysian, as an activist, as someone who has written about the conflict in Palestine, what the deal of the century actually means, and how does it affect the position of Palestine and the Palestinians. Now, as a Palestinian, I do realize that the deal of the century does have a Palestinian side, it has a regional side as well. The Palestinian section of the deal of the century will affect the Palestinians. They will see their lands appropriated to Israel, they will see their property gone. The century is something that is not seen, but we have been hearing about it recently. We have heard about normalization, efforts to normalize relations with Israel, or internal disunity and conflicts in the region. So what do you think, Chigo, of that? The deal of the century, its regional and Palestinian parts, and how to deal with it, how to deal with the deal.
Okay, thank you. I was trying to just grasp because your voice is staggered. Anyway, I think your question is about the deal of the century, how it is impacting at the regional level, both at the region around Palestine and also the other regions. So if that is the question, I think I have this very clear mind of seeing the deal of century. It's about killing the resistance. The details of it, as Dr. Sharif has been elaborating about what actually the deal is all about. But to me, the essence is they are trying to deal, and they are not succeeding that much, about killing the spirit of resistance of the Palestinians against the Israel occupation. And therefore, they try to plan out these offers. So when I link this to the deal of century with other regions, geopolitically, we see that it wants to start to take on as many countries to have a more favorable, positive notions of positive attitude towards this plan or this deal. And I say when Jared Kushner was, he doesn't care. I mean, he gave his view that, as you said just now, giving Palestine have been screwing up so many offers that they have been given for the last few hundred years. But putting that aside, I think the whole idea for the deal of century is actually, as I said, killing the resistance, and then they are trying to put on board as many people that they can pull in to accept this normalization process. I think they are trying to give that first focus on the Middle East region, and they are gaining that ground. I think, as Brother Hafizi was saying just now, they are able to now coax the Saudis to come in, and they are also working very closely with the Emirate, and they are closely working with Egypt. If those major countries been able to be linked up to the deal of century, then they have a good momentum on this. So I think that have to be understood. At that region, there's a whole lot of things that there will be resistance coming up, voices and all that, but I think they are going to do a very firm strategic or tactic so that they can establish this deal of century. But if you go further from that region to the other regions, and especially when we are working closely with our region here, I think they will start to see which country has got that diplomatic relations with Israel. And I think the communication on that deal of century will start. We have Thailand, diplomatic relations, Singapore have that diplomatic relations, and Philippines, and those few other countries. And I think they'll be working on that, and it's really up to us as a groupings in the region to really, make our point very loud, that we will not want this to happen. There's no endorsement coming out from a grouping. Nations may have their own their own rights to this kind of things, but as a grouping, we should link up with as many politicians in all the regions in ASEAN. We have to talk to them. We have to tell them that they have to stand up firmly, have to rise up and just say no to this deal. We know the implication. The implication is far-reaching. Once there's a normalized and formalized thing about the deal of century with us, with the region, one by one, you will start to, try to take advantage. So I think on that line, it is very important that the deal of century is not fully understood as what Dr. Sharif is saying, the whole ramification of it, the whole, implication from economics to politics to culture and whatnot. And therefore, I think the regional impact of the deal of the century, not only in the Middle East, but also our region should be understood. And we have to link up with those regions to say to them that they have also to be very firm on the stand about this deal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Haji. I believe that what you have mentioned and what you have clarified is important for each and everyone to know, because what is happening now is that Israel is taking advantage of the COVID situation and annexing land, grabbing more of the Palestinian rights. So to make things, understandable, we have to reach out to the public and tell them about the deal of the century and what it basically means. Now, I have a question for Tansri from one of our audience on Facebook. Here, Tansri, people are still interested to know more about the United Nations and its roles. Noor is asking, Malaysia has proposed a United Nations resolution to condemn the illegal Israeli settlements in the West Bank. My question to Tansri Said Hamid is on the possible actions that can be taken by Malaysia to bring up a new proposal to the United Nations to pressure Israel not to proceed with its annexation plans. So the possibility of Malaysia pushing for a new proposal at the United Nations. Tansri.
Thank you very much. I think you are giving a very onerous task to Malaysia. We have done all this while. We have always been at the forefront in championing the Palestinian cause, because I think it's a just cause. It's a cause that should be supported by the international community and by the regional community also. But I think if you talk about that, we'll always, this is where you need to coordinate and cooperate. I think it is important, for us to get on a continuous basis a UN resolution that this annexation is not internationally, it breach international law. You try to wipe out the identity of the Palestinian. So this cannot be done. And I think, I'm sure if we take it up with the Foreign Ministry of Malaysia, they can be at the forefront championing the cause of the Palestinian, whether it's at the more at the General Assembly and at the various agencies of the United Nations. And also, if you are talking about the Security Council is more difficult, because in the case of the Security Council, you have countries have veto power. The P5 have veto powers. So I don't think we should give up. And Malaysia, I'm sure, its policy will continue to support the Palestinian cause, and the only way of continuing this Palestinian cause is to bring it in the center, to be focused. And this, I think, your organization can continue to engage with the Malaysian side to make sure that it is always on the agenda. Another thing, I think, if you want it to be on the agenda also, it is important that this Palestinian issue, like the annexation, should be an agenda in the one OIC, two is in the ASEAN agenda. Should be in the ASEAN agenda because it affects peace and stability, not only in the region, but it has got impact, ramifications internationally. And I think countries in ASEAN would not like to see annexation to be done, because this is negative to the stability of the area. So it is a question of trying to of advocating more, engaging more, coordinating with the state actors plus the non-state actors. I think the state actors are important. At the end of it, we need the state actors, but we also need non-state actors. At present, non-state actors seem to be playing a very crucial role, pertinent role in order to influence the state actors. So I would say that we should not forget that there is still a place for us to play at the United Nations.
Thank you very much, Tansri. I believe you yourself has played some important roles in promoting Malaysia's position on the issue of Palestine. One of the good things about Malaysia's foreign policy towards Palestine is that it has continuously been consistent. Many of the OIC member states have been favorable of the Palestinians and pro-Palestine, but unfortunately, few of them, have been redundant, have changed their position from time to time. This is not the case with Malaysia, and we are very glad to have seen that. Since early days of independence and throughout the leadership of Dr. Mahathir and following leaders, the country has always been consistent in supporting the Palestinians, and this is something that we wish to continue, inshallah. Tansri, we will come to you for a final message, but allow me to ask Dr. Sharif, as a fellow Palestinian, you have grown up in Palestine, in the Gaza Strip. I have personally grown up in Palestine, in Hebron, in the West Bank, and we've both seen Israeli policies and how they affect our daily life. How do you think the new Israeli annexation policy will affect the lives of normal Palestinians in Jerusalem? How would the life of the young and old in the occupied city of Jerusalem be after this Israeli annexation plan?
Okay, actually, the Palestinian people of Bayt al-Maqdis is suffering from the Israeli occupation, not from the new stage of brutal actions by the Israeli or Trump plan. They are under the pressure, under the suffering since day one of the occupation, either 1948 or 1967. So they are in continuous struggle against the Israeli occupation day by day. And I believe after the Trump's plan, which called Deal of the Century, they faced a lot of violence by the Israeli occupation, because the Israeli occupation felt that they are stronger than they are equipped by the Trump's plan, so they become more brutal, more violent against the Palestinian people. I believe the Israeli government, which was formed just a few days, now it is more extremist, because we find that two members of the government came from the temple groups, and this is new by the Israeli government, because if we go back to the records, 2003. No one of the members of the parliament, even the parliament from the temple groups in the parliament, but year by year they become more seats. They have more seats in the Israeli parliament, and now they reserved some seats in the Israeli government itself. This will put more pressure on the Palestinian people, especially who live in the Baitul Maqdis. For example, the tax will be higher. All measures will be leading to evacuate the city from its people. The campaign against the IDs of the Palestinian people, which is not under the courts, it is under just the home minister. They will continue to revoke IDs from the Palestinian people who lives in Baitul Maqdis. For example, since it is until now, there are 14,000, but we expect they become maybe more than 20,000 in the few coming years. They want to put the pressure on the education, on the students, on the education life of the Palestinian people who live in Baitul Maqdis, because they want to Judaize the educational process. For example, now the local or the private or society schools in Baitul Maqdis cannot receive any fund from the municipality of the occupation who control everything in the Baitul Maqdis, until they change some parts of their curriculum. They want to Judaize the education, and I think they will suffer more and more until they have just two choices: to go to the Israeli schools or leave, because no support, no real support for the local education, or we call it Ahli education, Ahli, by people education, not supported by the Palestinian Authority government or by the Israeli authorities. It is just by the people itself, because the lack of support and the pressure against them, no any license, no any supporting, and if you want to be supported, you should follow our curricula and our criteria. This will put more pressure. The tax, also the social life in Baitul Maqdis will be affected more and more by the annexation, because now I know some people in Baitul Maqdis, one of the murabitat, they prevent her husband to come to Baitul Maqdis, like isolated him from her. So they provide her a deal to leave Baitul Maqdis and to go to the West Bank to live with her husband. And even she is a Jerusalemite, a Baitul Maqdis people. They prevent her, and they wanted her to go to leave Baitul Maqdis, to ban the people from being in Bait al-Maqdis. The occupation will continue its campaign against the people there, but I believe the Palestinian people, the Murabitin, the guards of Masjid al-Aqsa, the guards of the old city, will continue their resistance against this brutal Israeli plan to evacuate the city by annexation or something else. Thank you.
Dr. Sharif, before we conclude our webinar, do you have a final message to the Palestinian people, to your fellow brothers and sisters in Palestine?
Yes, I have two messages, one for Palestinian people and one for us. For the Palestinian people, please continue your struggle. You are on the right. And our Ummah, inshallah ta'ala, will support you. Now the Palestinian people faces a campaign against them for normalization. Not only normalization, they want to criminalize the Palestinian resistance and go to normalization. And sometimes they promote the Israeli fake propaganda against the Palestinian people, that the Palestinian sold their land, the Palestinian didn't resist their or defend their country, and the Palestinian make peace with the Israeli. Why we make peace? So I hope our brothers and the Palestinian people to continue their struggle and don't look to these voices, these unusual voices, and to look to the real voices we face by the Palestinian, the people who support the Palestinian. The second thing, now I realized during this lecture, we are fighting the annexation, not the occupation. But the original, the base we should fight and be against, not the annexation. The cause of the annexation, the occupation, we should always remind ourselves, our fight, our battle is with the occupation, not with the annexation, because the annexation is just a result of the occupation. So I believe it is a long way of a struggle, and we able to involve in this struggle, and we believe we will, inshallah ta'ala, gain this battle, inshallah ta'ala. Thank you, and barakallah fiqh.
Dr. Sharif, Jazakallah khairan. We would like to also hear a final message from our other panelists. I would like to listen to the final message of Sheikh Azmi, if possible. What's your message to the Palestinians and your message to the fellow Malaysians as well as fellow Southeast Asians?
Thank you. I salute greatly the struggle of Palestinians. We pray for you. We are going to say very clearly that you are not alone. We have the high support to you, and we would like to see that you stay on the path. This struggle is together, all of us. To our brothers and sisters here in Malaysia, we have definitely a lot of things to do. We are very far. We are almost like 8,000 kilometers away. But then that does not. This is not a social distancing. This is really, gaining the momentum that whatever happens to the Palestinians over there, it's also, the pain will also be felt here. And therefore, we have to show that. We have to always remind ourselves, unless an anti-Palestinian occupation is ended, we should not stop. There's a lot of things that we have to do here, not only at the social level, but also at the political level. At the ASEAN level, I'm calling my colleagues and all our networks, and we have not been able yet to have a very effective networking structure and the continuity, sustainability of our activities. I call upon all our brothers and sisters, both within the Islamic organization and a non-Islamic organization. We are in this together. It's only the things that the non-Muslims would definitely see that this is not only about the Muslim issue. But until and unless they see us in a very united way, that we are very consistent, this division that has been shown, in fact, even in OIC, does not augur well for us to speak to the non-Muslims, that they have to come on board with us, that this is not just about Arab issue or Palestinian issue or Muslim issue, this is about world issue. We have to reflect on them, that we are well united, we are very clear, and therefore then all the other organizations, non-Muslim organizations within ASEAN, the human rights organization, the justice organization, they will come with us. So I call upon all people from the ASEAN, that is show to the world that this part of the world, this ASEAN Southeast Asia is very, it's potentially very strong. It can show very strong solidarity and effective campaign towards the Palestinian cause. Thank you.
Inshallah, this is our hope. Thank you very much, Haji Azmi. And I would like to also give the floor to Prof. Hafizi, to listen to your final message to the Palestinians and to your fellow Malaysian and Southeast Asian activists.
Yes, this is my message to our fellow Palestinian brothers and sisters. We have made a lot of inroads in the past few years. We are in a stronger position now, and in fact, we are drawing strength from our Palestinian brothers and sisters. We are always inspired by their consistency and also by their persistence in holding up to the cause. And we are sure that they will continue with the struggle with all their hearts, all their minds, and whatever resources, whatever little resources that they have. Keep on inspiring us, so that we are together in this cause together. And then my message to fellow Malaysian, I think we have to get across the message to every Malaysian, regardless of race and religion. Like Tan Sri has mentioned just now, that this is not merely a Muslim issue. This is an issue of humanitarian rights. This is an issue of violation of human rights. This is an issue that needs to be upheld by every single people that has humanity alive in his hearts and in his mind. I think we should take the cue from the late Nelson Mandela, who has said with a very firm voice that until and unless the Palestinian issue is resolved, we will never see peace in this world. So it is very central and also fundamental for us to get everybody on board, and we have a very strong support from our non-Muslim MP like Stephen Sim, who is very supportive with the Palestinian cause. I hope every fellow Malaysian, especially our Chinese and Indian friends and other ethnic groups, will be together with us. This is not a merely issue of Muslim solidarity. This is for the rights and also for the honor of all humanity. And hopefully we will continue together in this path so that we will be standing strong in support of our Palestinian brothers and sisters. Thank you so much.
Not only for Muslims. Yes, the majority of the Palestinians are Muslims and they are heavily affected, but it is everybody's struggle, and the free people of the world have to play a role in ending this injustice in Palestine. I move on to Sayyid Hamid as well. We will be very honored if you also convey your message to the Palestinians as well as to fellow Malaysians in the closing of this webinar. Tan Sri.
Thank you, Muslim. I think what is important for us, for our Palestinian friends, you are inspired by your courage and perseverance.
Until Tan Sri is back into our discussion, I would like to remind of tomorrow's webinar. Back to you, Tan Sri, please. Your message to the Palestinians and to fellow
Palestinian is that we are very inspired by your courage, by your perseverance, even though you lack everything in terms of what the Israelis have done, in terms of assistance, and yet you continue for the struggle to uphold your dignity, to uphold your position, and to make sure that the Israeli will not succeed in trying to wipe out the identity of Palestine or the identity of Al-Quds. So I think it is important. Jerusalem identity, there is a historical identity, there is a cultural identity, there is a national identity. It is just not simply creating. But there is one. The other thing is, whether we want to call it annexation or occupation, occupation is making sure that the reality on the ground, this the Palestine has to address. A lot, the major powers like under Trump, say for example, and before it was under President Bush, they were talking about reality on the ground. The reality on the ground is that the occupied territories cannot be changed. You have got the status quo have been created, so you cannot change that. Now the question of the deal of the century is trying to give meaning to that. This is where the Palestinian must not lose hope. You must continue what you are doing at present to get acceptance. And annexation is just legitimizing the occupation, you know. So both you cannot disconnect. It's a continuous process, and this is a strategic and intended process. There is no, but I think another issue that is important when we want to make sure that externally people understand the struggle of the Palestinian, you must show a united front. That when it comes to the issue of your dignity, your human rights, your position as a state, as a sovereign state you want to create, there is no quarrel among yourselves. So I pray that the Palestinian will project a very positive image so that other people will be very sympathetic. Here is a people who have been victimized. They are the victim, not the Israelis. At present, the Israelis' propaganda have been quite successful in saying that they are the victim because the security under threat. You know, people forget that the life of the Palestinian is as important as the life of the Israelis. You know, as if the Palestinians' life being killed, being shot at, children being killed, women being killed. You build walls and you do whatever you want. Nobody is okay because it's against the Palestinian. So I think this narrative has to be changed. And a lot of this narrative to be changed, you need to continue what you are doing and what you are struggling for. Never give up hope, I think, which you are actually showing. I think as for the Malaysians, this is my own experience. There need to be more advocacy at the grassroots level. And this is seem to be, somehow or other, our debate and our discourses usually make it a Muslim issue. That is the reality. So you must not disconnect that this is an issue of humanity. And humanity where people have been denied their dignity, their rights, the respect for them. So I really, Malaysians, I think which I will call on all Malaysians, to not only to have sympathy with the Palestinian, to continue your support, to continue voicing your concern, to continue to uphold the rights of the Palestinian at the international level, as a right of a people for sovereignty, the right of a people to exist, and the one that is the victim of all the oppression and injustice are the Palestinians. So if this message can be put across more often across the board of all Malaysians, then we have a stronger platform to support our free Palestinian brothers and sisters in their struggle for their rights to exist and to be part of an international community that is independent and sovereign. Thank you very much, Muslim. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, Tan Sri, and thank you all of our panelists. Tan Sri Said Hamid Al-Bar, former Foreign Minister of Malaysia, Professor Hafiz Muhammad Noor, Chairman of MyCare Malaysia, Cikgu Muhammad Azmi Abdul Hamid, President of MAPIM, as well as Dr. Sharif Abu Shammala, CEO of Quds Foundation Malaysia. This webinar is the first of a series of webinars. We will be having another one tomorrow, inshallah, discussing the current developments in Palestine, and the speakers are Professor Peter Sizlak, Professor Ruslan Muhammad Noor, Professor Chandra Muzaffar, Professor Nazari Ismail, many professors, and it will be moderated by Dr. Ahmed Farouk Musa of IRF. It will be at 3 p.m. tomorrow. The organizers of today's and tomorrow's webinars and a series of programs that will come are IRF, MyCare, QFM, MAPIM, Asia, WE, Just International, Sejagat, PACE, BDS, and Pcom. This is a collective effort from a number of civil society groups. We welcome other NGOs to join this initiative and to have their own webinars and to join us in future webinars. We will be happy to have more the merrier, the stronger the message will be. My final message before we conclude this seminar and end our discussion is, number one, to the Israeli and American administration. The efforts, the policies, the plans that you have will not stop the Palestinians from resisting and seeking freedom and independence. And we will continue in spite of the changes in the international situation. The new normal means more virtual activities. We will have more virtual activities, inshallah. We will do our best to mobilize the public in protesting unjust policies. My message to the Palestinians: you are the main factor in ending occupation and in resisting occupation. We are all your echo. We are all your supporters. Please do your best to end Israeli occupation. Continue your steadfastness, your resistance, and your powerful determination to liberate your land. My final message is to my friends in Malaysia and across the region. We have been very glad in your support. We have seen a lot of initiatives and efforts. Please continue your good work, whether during Ramadan or after Ramadan. More good work has to continue and to come. We will be having more webinars and seminars in the coming days. We have had some with Indonesians. We will have some with Maldivians very soon. I personally will be online in a few minutes with some people from the Middle East and mainly in Iran to commemorate Al-Quds Day. I really hope that you will make sure that you do your best. Thank you very much for your time, and my gratitude and appreciation to our technical team that has made this forum a reality, especially Brother Qayyim, who has done a great job, and Sister Husna, who has helped a lot, Brother Khalid Jimat, and the rest of the team. Thank you. Israel's annexation of the West Bank will fail. Israel's occupation will end. Israel's apartheid will collapse. This is Muslim Imran from Kuala Lumpur. Jazakumullahu khairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
today will be the last, and tomorrow we all can go home free, and all this will finally end. Palestine, tomorrow will be free. Palestine, tomorrow will be free. No father to wipe away my tears. That's why I will cry. I feel scared, but I won't show my fears. I keep my head high, deep in my heart. I never have any doubt that Palestine tomorrow will be free. Palestine tomorrow will be free. I saw those rockets and bombs shining in the sky, like drops of rain in the sun's light, taking away everyone dear to my heart, destroying my dreams in a blink of an eye. What happened to our human rights? What happened to the sanctity of life and all those other lives? I know that I'm only a child, but is your conscience still alive? Oh, yeah. I will caress with my bare hands every precious grain of sand, every stone and every tree. 'Cause no matter what they do, they can never hurt you. 'Cause your soul will always be free. Palestine, tomorrow will be free. Palestine.